Welcome back. Today, we're revisiting an experiment that many of you have been waiting to see. In my previous video, I prepared several lemon cuttings using one propagation method, and now it's finally time to check on their progress. This is always one of the most exciting moments in gardening because every cutting tells a different story. Some surprise you with healthy new growth, while others remind you that patience is one of the most important skills a gardener can have. Let's carefully uncover the cuttings and find out what has happened over the past few weeks. As I gently remove the cover, I can already notice that one cutting has started producing fresh green shoots. That's definitely an encouraging sign because new growth often means the cutting is still alive and actively developing. However, the other cutting hasn't shown any visible signs of sprouting yet. That doesn't always mean it has failed, but it does tell us that different cuttings can respond differently even when they come from the same plant. Looking a little closer, I also noticed something that every gardener should pay attention to. There's a small amount of fungal growth inside the container. This happens quite often when humidity stays trapped for too long. Moisture is necessary for successful propagation, but too much of it without proper airflow can quickly create the perfect environment for fungus. Before making any decisions, let's carefully inspect the base of the cuttings because what matters most isn't just what we see above the surface, but whether roots have started forming underneath. I gently lift the healthiest looking cutting and examine the lower end as carefully as possible. Even though the top has produced fresh growth, I still can't see any roots developing yet. That means it's simply too early to transplant it. If we rush the process now, we could damage the cutting and lose all the progress it has already made. Successful propagation is never about speed. It's about allowing nature to work at its own pace. Since no roots have formed yet, the best decision is to leave the cutting undisturbed for a little longer. Sometimes a cutting develops shoots before producing roots, while other times the roots appear first. Every branch follows its own timeline, and forcing the process almost always leads to failure. Another important lesson from today's inspection is the fungal growth we discovered inside the cover. Because excess humidity has already started encouraging fungus, I'm not going to seal the cuttings again. Instead, I'll leave them uncovered so they receive better air circulation while still staying in a protected location. Good airflow reduces the risk of fungal infection and gives the cuttings a healthier environment to continue developing. Gardening isn't just about following fixed rules. It's about observing what your plants are telling you and adjusting your methods based on their condition. Every experiment teaches us something valuable, whether it's successful or not. Now that we've checked our first propagation method, it's time to try something completely different. One of the best ways to become a better gardener is by comparing different techniques instead of depending on only one. That way, we can discover which method consistently produces stronger plants and healthier roots. Today, I'm going to prepare a fresh set of lemon cuttings using another propagation technique, and over the coming weeks we'll compare the results to see which approach gives the highest success rate. I currently have 3 outstanding lemon varieties growing in my garden, and each one produces large, healthy, seedless lemons. These trees have performed exceptionally well, making them excellent candidates for propagation. Since they come from productive parent plants, there's a much better chance that future plants grown from these cuttings will inherit the same desirable qualities. After carefully examining the branches, I've selected 3 healthy stems that appear mature enough for propagation. Choosing the right branch is one of the most important steps because not every stem has the same ability to produce roots. The ideal cutting should be firm, mature, disease-free, and packed with healthy buds that will eventually develop into new shoots. Weak or damaged branches rarely perform well, no matter how carefully you plant them. Now I'll begin preparing the first branch. The leaves need to be removed because they continue losing water through transpiration. If too many leaves remain attached, the cutting spends its energy trying to keep them alive instead of producing roots. By removing unnecessary foliage, we help the cutting focus entirely on root development. As I trim the branch, I'm making sure to leave one healthy top bud along with another strong side bud. These growing points will later become the foundation for new branches once rooting begins. The first cutting is now properly prepared and ready for the next stage. Let's move on to the second branch. At first glance, this one also looks strong and healthy. I can already see a well-developed bud near the top, although the remaining buds are less noticeable. Sometimes buds are hidden beneath the bark and only become active later, so it's always worth preparing the cutting carefully instead of judging it too quickly. Every branch deserves a fair chance because even the ones that appear less promising can surprise you with excellent results. Now it's time for the third and final branch. This cutting immediately catches my attention because it's slightly thicker than the others. In many cases, thicker mature wood stores more energy and nutrients, which may improve its chances of surviving the rooting process. Of course, thickness alone doesn't guarantee success, but when combined with healthy buds and proper care, it certainly increases our confidence. As I inspect this branch closely, I can clearly see several strong buds that look healthy and well-developed. That's exactly what we want because vigorous buds usually produce stronger new growth once rooting begins. Before moving any further, I carefully remove every unnecessary section from all three cuttings. Clean, well-shaped cuttings are much easier to plant and have a better chance of directing their stored energy toward producing roots instead of supporting unwanted growth. Preparing cuttings properly might seem like a small detail, but in reality, it often makes the difference between success and disappointment. Now all three branches have been neatly trimmed and are almost ready for planting. The next step is preparing the lower section of each cutting so it can absorb moisture and nutrients more efficiently. Using a sharp, clean blade, I carefully scrape away a thin layer of bark from the base. This process exposes the living tissue underneath, encouraging faster root development once the cutting is planted. It's extremely important to do this gently because cutting too deeply can seriously damage the branch and reduce its chances of survival. A clean, controlled scrape is all that's needed. If this method produces healthy roots, I'll continue using it in future propagation projects because gardening is all about learning from real results instead of assumptions. At the same time, it's important to remember that not every experiment succeeds. Even experienced gardeners occasionally lose cuttings despite following every step correctly. That's simply part of working with nature. Every success builds confidence, while every failure teaches valuable lessons that improve future results. Rather than becoming discouraged, the goal is to keep experimenting, keep observing, and continue improving with each new attempt. Now that all three lemon cuttings have been carefully prepared, it's time to move on to one of the most important stages of the entire propagation process. Many gardeners focus only on planting, but what happens before the cuttings go into the soil often determines whether they survive or fail. Since the lower portion of each cutting has been gently scraped to expose the living tissue, that fresh surface is now vulnerable to bacteria and fungal infections. If harmful microorganisms attack the cutting before roots begin to form, the entire branch can rot within a few days. That's why protecting the cuttings before planting is a step that should never be ignored. To begin, I carefully wash each cutting with clean water, making sure to remove any dust, dirt, or tiny particles that may have collected on the surface during trimming. A clean cutting always has a better chance of rooting because it starts its journey in a healthier environment. Once they are thoroughly cleaned, I apply a natural protective coating using turmeric powder. Turmeric has been valued for generations because of its natural antifungal and antibacterial properties. Instead of relying on expensive commercial products, this simple kitchen ingredient provides an affordable and effective way to reduce the chances of infection during the early stages of propagation. I gently coat the exposed portion of every cutting, making sure the scraped area is completely covered. This protective layer acts like a natural shield while the plant begins healing itself. The same process is repeated on the second cutting and then again on the third until all three branches receive equal protection. Since these cuttings will remain in moist soil for several weeks, preventing fungal growth from the very beginning can significantly improve the chances of success. With the protective treatment complete, it's now time to encourage root formation. Professional nurseries often use commercial rooting hormones, but if you don't have access to one, nature provides an excellent alternative. Fresh aloe vera gel is one of the best natural rooting stimulants available. It contains beneficial plant compounds that help reduce stress, keep the cutting hydrated, and encourage healthy root development. I carefully slice open a fresh aloe vera leaf and collect the clear gel inside. Then I generously apply the gel over the prepared lower section of each cutting, making sure every exposed surface receives a smooth coating. This natural rooting treatment has been successfully used by gardeners for many years and is an excellent option for anyone who prefers simple organic gardening methods. Once all 3 cuttings have been coated with aloe vera, they are finally ready for planting. However, before placing them into the soil, I want to share one important piece of advice. Don't rush to copy this exact method immediately. Gardening is all about observing real results, and every environment is different. I would recommend waiting until I provide an update showing whether these cuttings successfully produce roots. If this method proves effective, you'll have much greater confidence trying it yourself. Now let's prepare the growing medium. The soil mixture I'm using is a combination of nutrient-rich garden compost and well-decomposed cow manure. This blend provides good moisture retention while still allowing enough air to reach the developing roots. Healthy propagation depends on maintaining the right balance between moisture and oxygen. Soil that dries too quickly can dehydrate the cuttings, while soil that stays overly wet may cause them to rot. Before planting anything, I water the pot thoroughly. This is actually the only deep watering these cuttings will receive at the beginning. The goal is to soak the soil evenly so it remains consistently moist for an extended period without becoming waterlogged. Instead of watering every day, it's much better to start with properly hydrated soil and then simply monitor the moisture over time. As the water slowly sinks into the potting mix, I make sure every part of the soil is evenly damp. Dry pockets inside the container can prevent roots from developing properly, so taking a few extra moments now can make a big difference later. Once the soil reaches the ideal moisture level, I gently press it down with my hands. This removes large air pockets and creates a firm foundation that will securely support each cutting after planting. Now comes the planting process itself. Each cutting is carefully inserted into the soil with the scraped portion facing downward because that's where new roots will eventually emerge. The healthy buds must always remain above the soil surface so they can receive light and develop into fresh shoots. I slowly plant the first cutting, followed by the second, and finally the third, spacing them evenly to give each one enough room to grow. After positioning all 3 branches, I lightly add another layer of organic compost around their bases. The purpose isn't to bury the entire cutting but simply to stabilize it while leaving the buds fully exposed above the surface. This allows new shoots to emerge freely without unnecessary resistance. Once everything is positioned correctly, I gently press the surrounding soil once more. Firm contact between the cutting and the soil improves moisture transfer and eliminates remaining air gaps that could slow root formation. Although the soil has already been watered, I finish the planting process by lightly misting the surface with clean water. This gentle spray helps settle loose compost, maintains surface humidity, and minimizes contamination that could occur while handling the cuttings. At this point, the planting process is complete. Looking closely, each cutting stands upright with healthy buds clearly visible above the soil, ready to begin the next stage of growth. The final step is choosing the correct location. Newly planted lemon cuttings should never be placed under intense direct sunlight because excessive heat can dry them out before roots have a chance to develop. Instead, I place the pot in a bright location that receives gentle morning light or filtered sunlight throughout the day. This provides enough energy for healthy growth without placing unnecessary stress on the cuttings. Finally, to maintain consistent humidity around the branches, I carefully cover the pot with a transparent plastic bag. This simple humidity dome traps moisture inside and creates a stable environment that encourages root formation while reducing water loss from the cuttings. However, it's important to keep an eye on condensation. If excessive moisture begins collecting inside the cover or signs of fungus appear, the cover should be removed temporarily to improve air circulation. Gardening is never about shortcuts or guaranteed success. Every cutting is an experiment. Every season teaches a new lesson, and every result, whether successful or not, helps us become better gardeners.